Welcome to another GenPool Spotlight. We have the new Director of Developer Relations for the ENF here with us today. And I can tell you for the last 2 minutes, I've been having problems with my USB. It hasn't been working, and I had to unplug it, plug it back in again. He's worth his salt. He knows his stuff, right? We're going back to the old school. Did you try again? Let's turn it off and on again and see if it works. So welcome to the show, Nathan James. For people who don't know, maybe you can give your introduction because you're probably a lot better at it than I
am. If anybody was here in the beginning of EOS, basically created the first EOS wallet called Scatter. Had a very long run with that, eventually had to let it go and die in the trenches against the megalomaniac that we won't talk about. Long journey. I ended up seeing a lot of really good people building in the space, which was wonderful. And I've been building with Ultra for the past 2 years.
Yeah, so I remember my first foray kind of in the EOS and figuring out Scatter, and there was some really interesting, ideas around it. But in a sense, for a small, brief time, I don't think EOS would have worked without it. And you and your brother and your team, you guys kind of jump-started the whole ecosystem. And you were doing some really interesting things. And there was some issues with funding. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people in this space that just can't afford to work for free.
We gave it a good run. It was a good 2 years.
Yeah, you gave it a good run, and believe it or not, that does happen. And yeah, so you guys poured it over. You were lucky enough to join and become part of, and they were lucky enough to accept you guys become part of the Ultra team. So you've still been in the space. Ultra is an EOSIO block producer. I know you guys are a little bit hush-hush, a little bit secretive over there, building and doing some amazing things. But if you could just give us a little bit of a rundown, what's been happening for the last year or in a bit over in the Ultra IO space before, we turned EOS off and back on again, right?
Right. Ultra is incredible. We've been doing core protocol changes for a while to kind of fix some of the issues that were identified with the protocol itself. Not necessarily issues, but also complications such as the account system and how tedious it is to manage resources and stuff like that, and onboarding and all of that good stuff. And a lot of work went into it, not just by myself, but there's a team of, I think, 10 blockchain developers there at the moment, which is a large portion of the company. And I can't really talk much about it, except for what's already public out there, and I'm not quite sure what's public personally. So I don't really want to touch on too many straws there. But a lot of really cool stuff is baked into the new Ultra protocol.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking to see where they go next. There's been a lot of really cool demos, and I've had a couple conversations with your brother off air, and I'm just excited to see what's coming out. So. But that's not why we're here today. Why we're here today is essentially to welcome you back to, I don't want to say the EOS community anymore, because, since the ENF has come in, things have kind of changed. Now we're back to kind of full-scale developer community chats where we're talking across blockchains again. We've got weekly, monthly meetings with Telos and Proton and Wax people and all that. As the director of developer relations, how does it make you feel that it's kind of we're kind of back to the point where people are actually looking at the EOSIO tech cross chains rather than segregating themselves? Because I know in Scatter you guys supported mostly EOS, because back in that time a lot of these other chains weren't born yet, right? But you were starting to come out and support other chains.
Scatter was agnostic from the start, because again, when Scatter came out, we didn't have a blockchain. It was 3 months before any EOS blockchain was actually launched. So the original Scatter had no default network in it. You had to specify it when the network launched, because we thought there was going to be like 2 or 3 networks that launched, and you'd have to select one. It didn't happen that way, of course,
Right.
but that was the plan. And I think that kind of methodology served us well over the years because we were very chain agnostic. Even with when Wax came out, we were the first wallet for Wax because they hadn't built the cloud wallet yet, and it was just very easy to import a network into Scatter. The same for Telos, and Telos did have some other wallets, but I think one of them was actually forked from Scatter. So a lot of stuff was built on that because it was very, very easy to import a network into Scatter, no matter what it was. I mean, we've used it at Ultra and didn't really support any of that stuff. So
yeah, like, so I mean, I still have it locked and loaded. I don't use it as much anymore, but there's a few dApps that I still do.
I'd be surprised if it works at this point. I shut down all the servers maybe 3 or 4 months ago.
Oh, really? Okay, I haven't tried it for 3 or 4 months ago, but like, yeah, there's I think there was some staking things that I had to go in and open up for Chintai or checks or something like that back in the day.
Right.
So, but yeah, like, I think it's interesting because you still have wallets like Wombat, for example, that are essentially running off the plug and play icon on blocks.io, right? Like,
Right.
So these other wallet apps were built on top of it, and in a way it's still been used.
The core protocols that were, yeah, for sure.
And so now what we have is this situation where other projects have come out and they've created their wallets, and the ENF is looking towards, sorry, these guys have got me freaked out now. Like, I don't know why, but apparently I'm supposed to brush my hair before I meet you. So I do apologize from the bottom of my soul for that. Thank you for keeping me clean, Charlie Q.
As if I've brushed my hair in the 4 years.
Right. So what we have now is we've got like a bunch of funding. Like, we've never really had this before, right? With the Pomelo grant system coming in and the quadratic, funding mechanisms over on that side, plus the matching engine that's coming in, from the ENF. Right. And now we're actually being given a director of developer relations who's able to go and do something. I'm not really sure what you're going to do. And that's kind of what I'm excited to hear about. So what are your plans as the new director of developer relations for EOS? And how do you think that this would be a game changer for all of the people like me, like Charlie Q, who like EOS Watchdogs, who have been here since the beginning, just sitting, wondering, waiting for when people will actually use this amazing tech?
Well, for me, it's really, I see it in 2 different parts, right? We have retention that's required for developers, and we have expansion that's required for developers. Retention is making sure that developers that come into the ecosystem stay in the ecosystem and build in the ecosystem. And I think that's been a problem for a long time in EOSIO, where developers come in, they see how complicated everything is, how lacking tooling there is, and then they just exit and they go to another blockchain, whatever it might be, Solana, Ethereum, whatever, right? And then expansion has to come after retention, or at least portions of retention, so that we start kind of funneling developers into EOS, saying, hey, come build this. We've got, ABC, we've got dollars, euros, whatever you want to get. Come build. And here's all of the tooling that makes it really easy for you to build. And those 2 things together is what I'm focusing on, albeit not at the same time, but retention first and then going towards expansion. And that's how I really want to start helping drive people into the ecosystem and making sure that they stay here.
I mean, I'm hopeful that the majority of people who already left. We're not going to see that much
I'm
anymore,
not focused.
Right?
I'm not focused on the people that are in the ecosystem. As sad as that might sound, I'm focused on bringing new blood into the ecosystem, right, which will fuel the people that are in the ecosystem right now. Because I feel like everybody needs a little bit of a kick in the butt, saying, "Hey, here's some new people. You better start getting your challenge mode on, because they're going to come and they're going to be hungry."
Right. And yeah, and we saw with Terra, like when the whole, Terra blockchain collapsed, that a few projects stuck around for Terra 2.0, but a bunch of them ported off to other chains, but whether it be Solana or, Ethereum or Cosmos. And so I'm kind of curious, right? Because there was that, right? Like Terra there was always a problem because those were the Solidity devs, and
Right.
And the Rust devs, and there were some other chains that were using that development language, right? But I think a lot of the complaints from developers or even users, which drives me absolutely insane when it comes to EOSIO, is that people just don't want to learn something new, right? And so where is this, where is the synchronicity between what EOS is doing in the blockchain space and what some other chains are doing, part one, and part two? Do you feel, which I kind of believe that you do, EOSIO technology is actually a better fit for people coming into this space that have zero blockchain knowledge?
Okay, so I'd like to take the second question first, actually. For those that don't have blockchain knowledge, of course, it's going to be easier to code in a language they already know, and there's a lot of C++ developers. I think that this was always true of EOSIO, but nobody really leaned on that in a way that brought developers in and taught them how to understand EOSIO with their C++ knowledge. Instead, they tried to go the other way and teach other developers C++, which is a strange thing to do, right? Because C++ is very different than most of the languages that anybody else is using, Solidity and Rust and whatnot. Well, maybe Rust is a little bit closer, but definitely not Solidity. And I think that attacking that from that perspective is probably going to do a lot better and be a lot easier. However, with that said, one of the things that I am aiming for in the future, not necessarily the first thing that we're going to be tackling, but is going to be trying to find a way to, well, there is already a couple, but highlighting, compiling other languages into WASM code. So for instance, TypeScript or Rust or Golang, all of these languages that are being picked up. We already have the EVM coming to EOSIO. So I don't really want to talk about Solidity because they're going to be able to just port over those apps anyway. It's kind of doesn't need to be talked about at this point. But those other languages that people are used to using and I think are very popular, especially TypeScript and JavaScript, which people are already building the front end for their applications in this. So they might as well build the back end for their applications in this. And I think those are probably going to be the biggest expansion items. So going back to this expansion versus retention, but we do need a little bit of retention first. People need to learn about accounts. They need to learn about resources. They need to learn about RAM and how to develop the smart contracts from a strategic perspective, from a security perspective first.
Yeah, so I think that there's two really interesting sides, right? Like it comes to the developer and the user, realistically speaking, and both of those things need to be kind of improved. But like from maybe the user perspective, in the EOSIO ecosystem as of now, what are a couple of the applications that you feel are doing a great job when it comes to making EOSIO tech easy? Do you have any things that you could like shout out that you think might be good examples for other projects to emulate or copy?
I think actually, from what I've been talking to a lot of developers recently, and also a lot of users, one thing that people seem to keep talking about is the Wax web wallet, which isn't necessarily in the EOS ecosystem, but it is in the wider EOSIO ecosystem. And it is something that's being worked on. I think it's called Unicove by the Greymass team, which is very cool. And I think it's something that's necessary. Of course, I have very strong opinions about this as somebody who's built a wallet, right? And I came to the understanding that it's very, very complicated for users to get accustomed to using a wallet, whether it's a desktop wallet, which I think is better, but obviously not everybody thinks that's better, or a Chrome extension, or anything really. But web wallets do make it quite significantly easier for people because they don't have to download anything. They don't have to install anything. Crypto users are already afraid of installing things. Nobody wants to get scammed and lose all of their, savings or investments or whatever, the loans they took from the bank and the mortgages of their children, right? So they don't want to lose that stuff. They don't want to install stuff. And I think that's a really good step, something to emulate. And it's something that's being worked on right now, which is great. Also the SDKs, which make it a little bit more transparent for the users, so they don't have to think about logging in with the wallet. It's all automatic on their side. They don't have to break the user experience of using the application with using another application, which is a little weird. We need to make it a little bit more like OAuth.
So I remember early Scatter days when you guys first started out. There was a time where I think a lot of Scatter users were using the Google Chrome plugin.
Yeah.
And then you guys kind of came out and you stated that like maybe this wasn't the most secure thing, and you ported it over to the desktop, right? And now we've got kind of both applications that are sitting on EOSIO. Like we've got Anchor, which is hard coded into the desktop, and I think they also have a mobile app that's quite popular. But we've also got like the Chrome plugins like Wombat, and then we've got the web wallets like you mentioned for like the Wax cloud wallet. Right. That are just kind of sitting there with social logins. So I'm curious as to, for the everyday user that's just going in and going to be doing DeFi or dApps or things like this, is there a risk for not having a full hardware stack that's plugged directly into your mainframe and using like it on your mobile? Or
I mean, there's a risk for having a hardware wallet, right?
Right, of course, yeah.
I mean, that's a really hard question. Yes, of course, there's a risk. There's a higher risk if it's on cloud. There's a risk if you just have a hardware wallet, you don't know what you're signing, especially in EOSIO with update auth, where you could just give away your account to somebody, basically. So there's always going to be a risk. Education might always have to be a thing, but it also depends on what you're doing. If you're just playing a game and all you're doing is signing that you're moving your character from A to B, that's an acceptable risk. If you have a wallet which has $150,000 in it and you're using it to, I don't know, mess around with some brand new application, you probably shouldn't be doing that. And you should take some extra steps to secure yourself with maybe partitioning your wallet into one small part which you mess around with and one bigger part which you hold in cold storage, which is, of course, what most people are telling you to do if we talk about wallet security. But the education there is a real problem, and that's not necessarily something that I'll be able to tackle because it's not really developer centric. It's going to be app to app to app and how they deal with it. I don't really know how to tackle that from the developer perspective.
Yeah, so like, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this as well, right? Like, because if we think about how blockchain tech works in the real world, and by no means am I like even close to a developer, right? Like, I understand a little bit of it, but I think like we're a little bit spoiled in the real world, right? Like we've made things from a technological level quite easy, right? I mean, I'd like to think of it in terms of a Costco card. Like I have a Costco card in Japan. Like if I go to Europe, or I think they have Costco's there, but if I go to Europe, I can walk into a Costco with my same card, right? And right now, a lot of blockchain tech isn't that way. It's right. You know, if I want to, I was talking to somebody yesterday who's they've come up with this idea in Wax called, CPU now. And if you remember back in the early days of EOS, there was a CPU crunch where it was quite difficult. And it's not big in Wax. It's a little bit better. It's being mitigated, but it still happens. And especially on a blockchain where you're looking at gaming and NFTs and transacting, I mean, this could cause you a problem, right? So what it is it's basically a CPU like loan and rental service that he's built. He's not a developer, first time coming in and doing this, and it's quite fascinating. But we were noting that and imagine plugging this into the real world, right? Like imagine walking into the bank and just being like, look, I want to get out my money. I need to interact and transact with my funds. And they look at you and they're like, well, that's all fine and dandy, sir, but actually we're having a little bit of an electricity crunch. So if you wouldn't mind walking across the road and prepaying, for some electricity and then getting a card and then coming back over here and showing us your card, then we'll be able to give you your money, right? And like that just doesn't scale in the real world, right? Sure. And so one of the biggest problems with EOS, I think, to convince other blockchain people to use it is the fact that I don't understand CPU. I don't understand like the resources. And why would I ever not want to be able to do a transaction when I could just pay $100 to have it done right now, which to us sounds crazy, right? Because this is what's happening over in other blockchains. What would you say to any developers who are a little bit, confused about the value of this EOSIO versus other pay-as-you-go transaction model blockchain models?
I mean, I think they both have value, right? Obviously, it's working in other places, so we can't just exclude that and say, hey, this is bad, right? With that said, I think that, of course, any blockchain that offers free transactions is going to be easier for developers to use. We don't necessarily have that in practice now because as you mentioned, it's very convoluted. I have to go across the street. I have to pay for something in order for me to go back across the street and use something else. However, there is things that are being built right now to kind of make that easier. So contract pays and all of that kind of stuff, which allows developers to pay for that in the name of the users, which I think is that's probably the most proper way to go, because I mean, it's how it works in the normal world, right? I go and pay AWS so that my users can use bandwidth. The users aren't paying for their own bit. Well, I mean, they are, but it's segregated to their own ISP, their own router. They pay a monthly fee for their router, and they're still going to do that. And the same thing is true of EOSIO, or it will be true of EOSIO going forward once we have the contract pays. And I think that's probably the best way to go about this. If we were to implement, and I'm pretty sure this is done. I remember this has been done, where you can pay a fee to make your transaction go through at the same time. It's just a baked-in action. That's great, but we're starting to then work again like these other blockchains, which are pay per transaction, and that wasn't really ever how people who signed up for, quote unquote, signed up for EOS wanted EOS to be. They wanted a transaction fee-less network. So we kind of have to follow that dream. That's kind of why we all got here. At least that's one of the things that brought me into the ecosystem the most.
Yeah, we're a little bit spoiled in this space too, expecting to get everything for free, and
well, somebody's paying. It's like taxes, right? So we're gonna pay for it somehow.
Yeah. So I mean, this is EOS Watchdog Zada Junkie said, EOSIO could allocate some inflation to cover new account creation and onboard everyone within that capacity. I mean,
there's some tools that need to be done before that to prevent Sybil and draining those funds. But yeah,
the ENF can stake EOS and use inflation to cover new accounts. And just a shout out to the scatter firewall, and what that entailed.
Oh, the brick wall, yeah.
The security that honestly, like, that caused me like at least a day of headaches, because I couldn't wrap my head around it at the time, because you guys were kind of early on implementing that, and I couldn't figure out why none of my freaking transactions would work.
That came out of necessity. Some people kept signing update us, and we're like, you know what, we're gonna brick wall this. Screw it. Which apparently helped a lot of people. So that was great.
So I've been thinking about this a lot recently, because I think we're implementing it. And I don't know how much you know about me, but I work for a few different projects here and there. GenerEOS being one of them. But over in the Uplift world, and over with a little bit of the stuff that I do with the Meta Collect team, and we've been talking about, how do we bring in, regular users, especially when it comes to the next hype cycle, which kind of seems to be leaning towards, NFTs, gaming, things like that, right?
Right.
And a lot of these people, they're used to social logins, because you sign up with Twitter, you sign up with Facebook, or you sign up with, I mean, even in the social login sphere, to have to actually physically type out your email address and then put in your password kind of seems a little bit. I haven't
typed out my password in years. What do you mean?
Right? It kind of seems like a little bit archaic, right? So what are your thoughts? I'm just kind of curious, like, as a developer, from a security perspective, what are your thoughts on, applications or programs or projects or personalized wallets that, essentially plug into a social login? Are you for? Are you against it? Are there any inherent risks that people should? Okay.
I mean, this was originally how Scatter was planned, right? It was very modeled after OAuth. Even the screens for the login were modeled after like old Facebook pop-ups or something like that. Some mock-ups that I found, Google Images or something. So it was very, very much modeled after OAuth, which is the social login. That's the tech underneath social login. And I truly believe that that's the way forward for just in general blockchain applications, for it to feel like that, because of course users have been trained for the past, decade and a half, that this is how we log into stuff now. You log in with your Google account, you log in with your Facebook account, you log in with your GitHub account, right? And it's normal for them now. If it's normal for us as people who grew up and saw the internet flourish and grew up coming into this, then it's definitely normal for people who were born into the internet as it is today. And we can't really fight against that grain. We can try to create some new stuff on top of that, but we're going to have to at least try to mold ourselves into that structure before we can change it from the inside.
I think you're coming like into the space with a very unique perspective, as a developer, as someone who built one of the foundational, apps in the whole, essentially what has become the EOSIO ecosystem, and then moving and porting over to, what the Ultra.io team is doing. Right. So for people who don't know what Ultra.io is trying to create, they're essentially trying to create a gaming engine that, like, real legacy world game companies can plug into, build upon, utilize it, and bring that out into the world. I might have butchered that, but I think that got the gist, essentially.
Well, more than a gaming engine, it would be like a Steam kind of competitor, so a game distribution center.
So one of the things that, like, I've always grappled with is how to convince, and I'm not even a gamer. It's funny, like I didn't even really do gaming stuff until I got into the blockchain space, until I really saw the value of it. Right?
It was your gateway drug.
Right, exactly, 100%. So it's I think it's always really difficult to convince people that you can actually make money with gaming and not have to spend it, not have to go to the store and buy the upgrades, not have to, do all of this stuff. What do you think is the biggest challenge to getting legacy projects? It doesn't necessarily have to be gaming, but I would say gaming and DeFi are the two biggest legacy products to come in and use and work with, EOSIO or blockchain technology in general.
I don't think it'll be a hurdle at all. I think that all it's going to take is one game. One game is going to come in and implement it in a way that doesn't alienate users, doesn't make them feel like it's a cash grab. Because that's what people are really afraid of. All the gamers, you see them lashing out at NFTs. Why? Because for the past 10 years, companies have been microtransacting the hell out of them until they can squeeze every single piece of juice out of the rock that is their wallet, and they're tired of it. They want to be able to just come into a game and play for fun. When they actually bring the NFTs or GameFi or whatever it might be into gaming in a way that doesn't alienate them, doesn't make them feel like they're being juiced, and actually provides some benefit for them and shows them that we're not trying to do bad for you. We're trying to do better for you. This is just a better business model for us. We can take fees off of the side while you make money, right? So everybody makes money. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not I win and you lose. You get fun and I get your money. It's you get your money, I get your money, you have fun, we have fun, and everybody wins. So all it's going to take is one game to do that, and I think it will explode throughout the ecosystem. Gamers will feel far more trusting of this kind of stuff, because right now, honestly, 99.9% of the games that are being built on blockchain are pretty much cash grabs, in the same way as it is in just regular gaming, because most of those games are cash grabs too. They're alive for 2 years and then they die, if anything, right?
Yeah,
count on two hands the amount of games that lived.
It's interesting. Like I'm laughing because even the successful games really, in a way, are cash grabs. And I think the difference, like in legacy infrastructure, before blockchain,
right?
I think the difference between the ones that are successful is they're actually using some of that cash to, like, update and develop their games, right? And so if you're doing that, but if you're doing that in blockchain, sometimes you get yelled at because it's like, no, you're asking for more money. It's like, well, you don't get everything.
Companies
right?
need money to survive, man. It's simple. Like,
so,
So before you continue, I've started playing Diablo. Apparently, Diablo just got released on the phone, on the mobile phone, and like, of course, it's crazy because a couple years ago, people were like, "Oh, you're releasing Diablo on mobile. Nobody wants that crap." They got booed off of stage at like game dev, and I played it, and it's totally cash grab. I've already spent, like, I don't know, maybe $20 on it, and I never spend money on microtransactions in games, but they got me. So it sucks that that's the norm today. But please continue.
No, it's all right. Like I again, like it's difficult. So for people who don't know, actually, GenerEOS just kind of formed a partnership with the other project, another project that I'm associated with, which is the Uplift World, and we're working together to run a block producer on Wax. So if you can, support the new GenerEOS proxy on wax.io. We've been a top block producer in EOS and across a bunch of other EOSIO chains for a while. So it was only a matter of time until we got into the Wax infrastructure and system, right? But like over at the Uplift World, one of the things that we always, struggle with is like we're utilizing as a base layer one of the most played games ever, which is Minecraft in the history of gaming, right? And how do you plug that in, right? And so it takes a little bit of dev work, and we're fortunate enough that we have some decent devs that know what they're doing, and we can, get that up and running. But one of the things that we don't have to do is we don't have to build it from scratch, right? We just have to kind of put a layer on top of it that can utilize the transparency and efficiency of blockchain technology, which I think is really good. Now, I'm going to segue. It's going to seem like a roundabout way, but I have a direction here. Recently, with the ENF, what we've seen is a big focus on a lot of these blue papers. And a lot of the blue papers are developer oriented. And we've got some of the top minds in the space, some of the top teams in the space collectively coming together and creating essentially a framework for progress when it comes to things like wallets, when it comes to things like gaming, when it comes to things like development. As a director of developer relations in the ENF, do you have any way that you are planning to plug in with all of these, or are you planning on, using your skill set to do something else with your role?
I mean, really on my side, it's more evangelism than anything. These things that are coming out of the blue papers, they're coming out, whether I say so or not, right? So the best course of action for the ecosystem is to provide the ability for people to learn how to use them, of course, so that the teams that are actually working on them can continue working on them without having to create plethora of developer documentation, because that stuff takes a long time. Just as long as developing anything it takes to make a documentation, and to make a good one takes even longer, right? Something that people can search through and sift through easily and just find what they need very quickly. So all of that stuff is definitely going to have a big place in the stuff that I do. If we're talking about actually building anything, that's not really on my plate right now. I don't know what the future serves. I want to prefix everything that I'm saying here with the future is possible to change, right? Because, like any good business, you have to pivot with the things that come at you. And if you don't, then you're going to die, and we can't die. So.
Right. I think, we might be cats over here in the ecosystem.
We might be. We might be. And we have way more than 9 lives, apparently.
So, So again, like to go back to what you said earlier, your main focus, I'm going to paraphrase here, but your main focuses are essentially adoption and retention, right?
Yes.
And so you're not looking to disrupt anything that's happening in the ecosystem already. If anything, you're probably looking to try to bring more developers in to work on, more types of things. So I'm going to let you go, because like if I can keep asking questions, but I'm sure that there's things that I'm never going to pick up on that you might, want to state that you have ambitions towards or things to do. Like I don't know if I can believe you anymore. Like I kind of have one slight issue with, you being appointed to this. And it's kind of going to be a little bit difficult, I think, for you to not develop as much as you're used to, right? Like, but like, yeah, I'm sure like that insight is going to be ridiculously valuable when it comes to, what you're planning. So just give us a rundown on anything that I might have missed, actually.
Well, one, I don't think that, what is the feeling a developer gets from developing, right? You envision something, you strategize on how to do it, and then you complete it. And that's the same thing for many, many things, whether it's art or doing developer relations, creating documentations. What I'm doing right now, I have this gigantic mind map of all the things that I'm going to be doing from now until probably the next 5 years from now. And I just get to sit there and strategize on how to go from piece to piece to piece to piece to put together this huge puzzle, which brings in developers, which brings the community together, which makes number go up and kind of brings everything together. And that's just as, if not more fun than sitting there and developing something, to me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I'm excited to see you guys back, working, and I'm also kind of excited to see how this is going to tie in with some of the other chains. Obviously, you've been here for a while.
I mean, my focus is on EOS, but everything that we do is probably going to have a pretty big impact on all the other chains too.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how all of this blue paper stuff in conjunction with these weekly, bi-weekly, monthly meetings with developers across multiple chains, EOSIO chains, is going to work. So I'm super excited for that. I just want to welcome you, as some of the people have in the comments, back to the EOS ecosystem. I know you never really left. You didn't abandon us. You were over there doing your thing with EOSIO technology somewhere else, making your splash. But it's good to see you kind of back in the public eye. I don't want to, keep you here for an hour because you probably have a lot of things to do. And we've actually been thinking about reorienting this GenPool Spotlight series to be a little bit shorter on account of having more exposure to people over, less amount of times, rather than just sitting down with you for an hour every 6 months, or people like you. I'd rather sit down with you for 20 or 30 minutes and get frequent updates every couple of months. So I'd love to welcome you back, after
thank you.
Get a running start and get us plugged in. Of course, let us know at GenerEOS what we can do to help, because we're always looking to promote people outside of the ecosystem, other block producers, things like that. If there's anything else that you'd like to, touch base on, how do people get in touch with you? If there's people that are looking to give assistance, what's the best way in doing something?
So for now, my primary goal right this very second is gathering information so that will inform the decisions that I'm making going forward for all of this stuff. Yes. Did I hear number go up? No, you did not. I said no such thing. But so the best way to get a hold of me right now is Twitter. Send me a DM. My DMs are open. Let's set up a call. If you're a developer, I want to hear what you're doing. I want to hear your pitfalls. I want to hear what's stopping you, what's hurting you, what's helped you in the past, so that we can make those things stronger, and we can bring in all of the tools that are missing, because I can go and develop something in a bubble and it'll be great for what I think, but it's probably not going to help everybody. So if I can get as many people as many chefs as I can into the kitchen, the more the merrier.
You're going to get me in trouble here, because now I have no choice but to say this. One of the biggest downfalls of EOS, I think, always was that there were so many great developers that were developing in a bubble. Yes. And so now I think we're at that point where we can kind of see people coming out and working together on these blue papers. And I'm really excited to see how people tap into what you're doing, and how you can tap into the incredible talent in this ecosystem. Because in a way, it is really unrivaled.
It is. It truly is. We see all these graphics all the time of A versus B. And I'm not really a fan of A versus B, because it says, oh, you suck and we're better. I don't really believe in that kind of stuff. But we know the capabilities of EOSIO architecture. We've seen the benchmarks. We know not how much better it can be, but how much more useful it can be to developers who are specifically looking at throughput and whatnot. And it would be a shame for us not to take advantage of that and utilize it to its maximum capacity.
Very much agreed. Well, thank you for joining us, Nathan. If you guys have any questions or comments, maybe chuck them in the comments below, because we'd love to shout that out. And like I said, I hope to have you back here again sometime soon, or somewhere that I'm hosting, to dive into all the goodness that you're about to embark on.
It was a pleasure, and let me know. Always up for it.
To the rest of you, we've got some interesting people coming up in upcoming GenPool Spotlights. We're going to have Juan over from Nifty Blocks on the show very soon, as well as a few other surprise guests, hopefully to dive into some really cool stuff happening.
We like surprise guests.
Right. Yeah, me too. All right. And yeah, please like and share this out. And we will see you all again next time on the GenPool Spotlight.